Texas Congressman Jodey Arrington, chairman of the Budget Committee. Good morning to you. You think spending is about to get out of control? I kind of feel like it's almost impossible at this point for there to be meaningful spending.
Yeah, well, spending's been out of control for a while. I'm not going to say that Republicans haven't made their contribution to our unsustainable debt trajectory and the fiscal irresponsibility in Washington. But for 5 years, or for the last 2 years rather, $5 trillion, an inflationary firestorm, soaring interest rates, and an economy that's teetering on recession, and many predict will have a sustained recession. And then you have a debt crisis situation on the horizon that would wreak havoc not only on the economy, it would undermine our security, and quite frankly, I think it is the crisis of crises. I think it is the biggest long-term threat to our way of life in America. So we have to take opportunities like this to evaluate our debt position, our financial health as a nation, and then we need to make course corrections. It's what every American family does, business does, state and local government. I think it's what Americans expect from our president and from all of our leaders.
Chairman, by the way, I don't disagree with you. I think the debt issue is a meaningful one. I remember when I wrote the book Too Big to Fail, the phrase too big to fail was used only in the sort of context of banks. Today we use it in the context of municipalities, cities, and in fact countries. So I fear and worry about that issue. The question, though, that I'd ask you is whether you think that this debt ceiling is going to be used as a bargaining chip in some way that could turn dangerous.
I believe it will, and I believe it has to, because, and just a few numbers for context for your viewers, $16 trillion over the next 10 years, half of that is interest. We'll spend more on interest payments on the debt than on all of national defense. That'll be over $1 trillion annual spend, and then it's twice the size of our economy in 30 years. So we have to do something to put common sense spending controls or other fiscal reforms. And it's happened.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying, if you think about the full faith and credit of the United States, and then you start to think about the debt ceiling, and you start to think about the way the rest of the world thinks about our country, if we get into a terrible sort of midnight situation, as we have, unfortunately, all too often, what that actually ultimately does to the cost of credit and to all of these other issues.
Yeah, well, I think what could happen to the cost of credit is for our creditors and future investors to say, I don't think that America can pay back their debts. I don't think at $2.7 trillion in annual deficits, which is in 10 years, I don't think that their full faith and credit is good anyway. So to me, you've got a debt crisis looming over the heads of our children and this country, and you've got an opportunity to have an adult conversation, and we're not going to default on our debt. We're going to protect the full faith and credit of the United States. But we're going
But Chairman, there are folks in your party who would be almost okay with that, right?
Almost okay with a default?
I don't know about a default, but putting the situation in a pretty precarious place as perhaps a negotiating maneuver.
Well, again, we've had the debt ceiling for 100 years. We've had some of the best fiscal reforms in the last 20 or 30 years that have come from debt ceiling negotiations. I think it's more irresponsible to not have this conversation and just have a clean debt ceiling and just sort of keep skipping down the road as if nothing is going to happen if we don't start reining it in. So I think the American people are on our side here. I think they're going to bring the president and Democrats to the table. And I don't think you're going to have this apocalyptic scenario. I think we're actually constitutionally obligated to pay the debt. But I think Republicans are going to put sort of affirmations of that and paying other things that are going to be important to the country. But there's a lot of bloat, a lot of waste, a lot of unnecessary spending, and we've got to get control of it. And I don't know how much longer we have, but as for me and my position, we are not going to retreat or surrender until we get our fiscal house in order.
Can I ask you just a totally separate question on a different issue? You're a Texas man, oil man. We've been debating this morning. We're going to debate it a little bit later as well. This issue of Chevron announcing this morning yesterday, massive buybacks and dividends. You heard the White House very upset about this. People talking about windfall taxes and the like. What do you think the right answer is?
I think when you tax and regulate something like this administration has as a whole of government assault on this industry, you get less of it. And if you get less of it vis-a-vis the demand for it, you're going to pay more for it. So I think that this situation of high energy prices and the numbers that you said on dividends is a result of this administration's energy policies. This is a self-inflicted problem by this administration, and it's one of many.
And then finally, you a TikTok man? You on TikTok?
No, I'm not a TikTok man, and I don't like the time my kids have spent on TikTok.
But do you fear it's a national security threat or just a threat to the mental health of our kids?
Both. I think it's a problem for our kids, but I think this is just another way for China to infiltrate our society, collect information on us, and I think we need to wise up. States are doing that on their own. I think our country ought to do it.
Chairman Arrington, we appreciate you joining us this morning. Hope to talk to you again soon.